Welcome back YouTube. Today we're going to go through the importance of timing when it comes to eating and whether or not timing of food intake will make a difference for your results when it comes to fat loss. So we're going to talk about meals, we're going to talk about certain macronutrients, we're going to talk about food intake in general and whether or not when you eat, the times that you eat, if that's going to have an impact on your goals. So by the end of this video, you'll be confident in knowing if you need to be worried about when you're eating, and in particular, what you might be eating at certain times. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the video, please drop a link. If you have any questions throughout, throw them down below. And if you haven't already, do go ahead and subscribe. Okay, so it's quite common to see people stating that if you eat X food, or if you eat at all, at certain times in the day, that can negatively influence your fat loss efforts. For example, we'll see people saying, you can't eat after 6 p.m. or you can't eat after 8 p.m. And if you do, that's going to result in your fat loss being stopped and potential fat being stored. So I'm going to walk you through some scenarios where you might be concerned about the timing of any particular intake. And we're also going to walk through whether or not we then do need to be concerned about when we're eating and the times we're eating at when it comes to fat loss. So let's first address the big topic. Is timing of food intake going to interfere with fat loss? Now the short answer, because I like to keep things simple, is no, but let me explain why. When it comes to food intake in general and fat loss, the biggest thing we need to be concerned of is our total amount of intake, our total amount of calories that we're taking in relation to our expenditure. As we know, we need to be in a calorie deficit, taking in less food than we are expending. That is the main thing we need to concern ourselves with. If we are achieving a calorie deficit, nothing away from that in terms of, obviously, apart from coming out of a calorie deficit by consuming more food than we're expending, nothing away from that is going to directly stop us from dropping body fat. And that includes timing of when and what we're eating. Okay, so food intake is massively more important and a greater focus than timing of what we're eating. In fact, the timings of what we're eating, really wouldn't worry about it at all, other than potential smaller impacts on factors which we're going to come on to in a minute. But if we're making sure that we're in a calorie deficit, it doesn't matter when you're eating. You could eat all your total daily intake before 6 p.m. and be fine. You could eat all your total intake after 6 p.m. and be fine. The only time the actual timing of you eating might be of some importance is if at certain times in the day you notice hunger and you want to manage that hunger. Therefore, it might be a good idea to actually place some calories around that window to help you manage that hunger. So for example, if you know that at 7 p.m. at night you actually do get quite hungry, it might be a good idea to save some calories so you can eat around 7 p.m. to manage hunger. That way you're not going to be starving, you're going to be craving food before you go to sleep. You might even get better sleep, and when you wake up, you might find you're not as hungry as you normally are, and you might actually make better food choices. So is eating at a certain time of the day going to stop you from dropping body fat? No. However, there are some things we might want to take into consideration when we're looking at timing of certain food. Protein is one of those things that we might want to consider when we're eating it in the day. Okay? Now, this isn't going to be a set hour of the day that you need to eat protein. For example, I'm not going to tell you that you have to be eating protein at 12, 4, and 8 p.m. No. But we probably ideally want to be trying to make sure we're getting frequent feedings of protein in, and therefore timing your protein in relation to your normal feeding times would then allow you to likely have a consistent, frequent feeding of protein. For example, if you make sure you're eating protein in your breakfast, if you have it in your lunch, in your evening meal, and any snacks there and in between, all of a sudden, your protein intake is going to be frequent. That's going to help manage hunger, and it's going to help us in retaining muscle mass. So your timing of your protein is slightly important if we're looking at doing the best we can to help us manage hunger and retain muscle mass. And then the other food group that we might want to consider when it comes to timing when we're having it through the day is carbohydrates. Okay, now the reason for this being, when you, as we've stated before, go through fat loss, creating a calorie deficit, food intake is obviously going to be lower, and it might need to be further lowered as time goes on. That means, as a general rule, if foods drop in, we're going to obviously have a lower intake of each and every food group. Carbohydrates therefore might take that hit. Now, when carbs are getting low, timing of those carbs might then become a factor you want to consider. Why? Because carbohydrates are going to be beneficial for training performance and recovery, which means it might start getting or becoming a good idea to time your carbohydrates pre, so before your training, and post, after, to help us with training performance before workout, and then helping us with recovery after. Again, when we're looking at retaining muscle mass, okay, during a fat loss phase, so we're looking at potentially getting the best results. We want our training performance to be as good as it can be for as long as it can be. So therefore, carbohydrate timing might become important and might play a role, just as I've described there, to help training performance and to help recovery. Okay, if recovery is poor, you're not going to be able to train as well potentially in the future. And obviously, if training performance, if we go into the session and we're already drained, low on energy, training performance is going to be hindered. So carbohydrates timing then can play a role. So there you have it. Is the timing of when you eat important? As a rule of thumb, no. Especially for fat loss in terms of direct impact on fat loss. No. When you eat isn't going to matter. However, when we break it down in a little bit more detail, when we're looking at feeding windows of stuff like protein and carbohydrates, is the timing of those things going to matter? Potentially, they might have small benefits. Yes. Are they worth taking? Are they worth trying to get the most out of? If you're looking for the best results, then yeah, probably. But if someone tells you can't eat after 6 p.m, then tell them to jog on. Hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please drop a like. If you have any questions, throw them down below. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe so you can keep up to date with the rest of the videos. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.